Welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show. Happy Thursday, everybody. Former Washington Post journalist, I say that kind of pun intended. She's no actual journalist, but she is a left-wing political commentator. Taylor Lorenz is going viral as of Tuesday morning for all the wrong reasons again. So Lorenz, whose hot takes have just become increasingly radical to the point of objectively obscene over the past couple of years, said publicly on Piers Morgan Uncensored Monday night that she felt joy after seeing video of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson being gunned down in cold blood in Manhattan by a deranged lunatic last week, saying that it's just comeuppance for the healthcare industry's treatment of sick people. The video of this was absolutely shocking, as I'm sure you've seen. It's been everywhere. I mean, this man just literally walking down the street in New York City, which, quite frankly, if I'm being honest, was probably a mistake. But here he is just walking down the street, and a man in a jacket and a hood just casually strolls up behind him and shoots him point blank in the back, killing him dead. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Anybody with any shred of basic decency would think that it's horrible. Any semblance of humanity whatsoever. But of course, the left has none of that, none at all. Because instead of being absolutely shocked and appalled and horrified over watching this man be shot dead on the sidewalk, leftists are glorifying his murder because, remember, he was the CEO of a health insurance company and one of those corporate elites that the left just sort of blames for all of their problems because it's easier than taking responsibility for their own choices and their own issues. We're just going to blame all the rich people. We're going to blame capitalism, blame everybody else. It must be all of those dirty, rotten people with money's fault. The shooter has been identified as Luigi Mangione, who was one of these crazy leftists who blamed corporate elites and blamed the healthcare industry and the health insurance industry and capitalism and all of the social, boogeymen that the left loves to blame for everything. He was arrested and jailed earlier this week, and he became an overnight hero for leftists who are not only singing his praises, but are now having strange sexual fantasies about him or fetishizing him. I mean, he's become this weird sexual icon. Literally leftists on the internet saying that they want to date him, women and men. I mean, this is absolutely bizarre. And here's how sick this has gotten. There's a jacket that is sold by Macy's, the clothing retailer. And some people on the internet think that they have identified this jacket as the one that Mangione was wearing in the video when he shot Thompson dead in the street, like the lunatic that he is. And the jacket sold out in a matter of hours after some people on the internet identified it as the same jacket. It's a $225 coat, and Macy's can't keep the dumb thing on their shelves right now because nut job liberals are buying it up like a piece of American memorabilia. I mean, this is insane. There was an assassin lookalike competition held in Manhattan's Washington Square Park, which is near where Thompson was gunned down like an animal. Items with the phrase deny, defend, and depose, which are the words that were written on the shell casings that were found at the murder scene, written by Mangione on the shell casings for the bullets that he used to kill this husband and father of two. And those words are popping up now on all kinds of items that are being sold online on places like Etsy and Amazon, which is, had to go pull these items from the shelves after realizing that, this murderer was being glorified. It's popping up on things like wine tumblers and t-shirts and even Christmas ornaments, by the way. Christmas ornaments with these words on it honoring this cold-blooded killer for whatever sick freak, I guess, is decorating their Christmas tree in, deranged murderer theme this year. Never occurred to me to do that, but this is how wackadoodle, this is how absolutely unhinged the left has become. I mean, there's an entire market for murderer merch. It's selling left, right, and sideways. Well, okay, mostly left here, but it just kind of gives you a clue as to the level of sick and twisted and violent that we are dealing with here. This is the left. This is who they are. They're showing it to you. Believe them. In fact, as if the Mangione merch wasn't enough to convince you, just listen to Taylor Lorenz, who, as I mentioned earlier, is somehow a journalist with actual, bylines and everything. She's a former writer for the Washington Post. Her work has been featured all over the place, including in the New York Times. And she happily admitted that she felt joy watching Thompson be shot to death in the street. It made her happy. She felt genuine elation watching this dude get assassinated just weeks before Christmas, shot dead in the street. Here's how she described it to Piers Morgan, who I'm sure, like, many of us who are actually over here as decent human beings with some sanity, he had trouble wrapping his brain around her lunacy. Check this out.
I do believe in the sanctity of life. And I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, because it feels like...
Serious?
I mean...
Joy at a man's execution?
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy. Because again,
we're watching the footage. How can this make you joyful? This guy's a husband, he's a father, and he's being gunned down in the middle of Manhattan. Why does that make you joyful?
Thousands of Americans that he murdered. So are the tens of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, who died because greedy health insurance executives like this one push policies of denying care to the most vulnerable people. And the many millions of Americans that have watched people that I care about suffer and in some cases die because of lack of health care.
So should they all be killed then? Should they all be killed, these healthcare executives? Would that make you even more joyful?
No, that would not.
But why not?
And,
why are you laughing?
I think because it wouldn't fix the system.
You seem to find the whole thing hilarious.
I find your question funny.
A bloke's been murdered in the street. I don't find it funny at all.
I don't find it funny that tens of thousands of Americans die every year and because they are denied life-saving health care from people like this CEO. Now, I want to fix the system. You're right. We shouldn't be going around shooting each other with vigilante justice. No. I think that it is a good thing that this murder has led to America, or really the media elites and politicians in this country paying attention to this issue for the first time. You mentioned you couldn't understand why somebody would feel this reaction when they watched a CEO die. It's because you have not dealt, it sounds like, with the American healthcare system in the way that millions of other Americans have.
I've dealt with the healthcare system in various ways in America. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but the idea that I would view it as something...
Have you been denied life-saving treatment?
The idea that I would view it as something joyful that a man has been, who's just a healthcare executive, has been executed in the street, I find completely bizarre.
I mean, this right here, what kind of sick, messed up, I mean, how deep do your issues, does your bloodthirstiness, the evil that has rotted out your brain, how deep does it have to go that you are glorying in the brutal, gruesome death of a man gunned down in cold blood simply because you don't like what he did for a living and because you think that, his company and the industry that he was in are responsible for your problems and that he deserves to be murdered in the street, his family left devastated because you don't like what he did for a living. You don't like the company that he worked for. I mean, take all the issues that you want with the healthcare industry, the health insurance industry. I mean, Lord knows I've got plenty of those myself, but literally nothing at all about that inspires me to feel joy at watching this man, this husband, this father die bloody on the street because some nut job decided to riddle him full of bullets. How demented are you? What a reprobate mind must you have to openly say you felt joy in such a thing? There are not words to describe how disgusting and inhumane and vile you are if that's how you feel. Or how dangerous you are to society, to ordinary people. That you have reached a place in your heart that you feel joy at such a thing. This is disturbing stuff, y'all. And it's being said, it's being displayed out there publicly, right out there in the open for everybody to see, and it's being normalized. And it's terrifying how many people feel this way. Now compare all of that to the good news that we got this week in the case of Daniel Penny, who of course was the Marine veteran who was acquitted earlier this week on the charge of negligent homicide stemming from an altercation that he had with a violent, mentally ill drug addict in May of 2023 on the New York City subway. The fact that Daniel Penny, who's a young man, he lost a year and a half of his life to the legal battle of trying to defend himself when he had done nothing wrong, and the threat of going to prison for 15 years over it. The fact that he lost a year and a half of his life to that is a travesty, but we can at least be happy that justice was done in this case and that Penny walked free. I wasn't hopeful about that, I'm not going to lie. This is New York City, and in situations like this, in cases like this, where there is such social pressure by such a large group of people to convict someone based on the color of their skin and based on the warped perception of social justice that a large faction of our society seems to have adopted, a lot of times that can, I think, create enormous pressure on even the most sequestered of juries to convict someone simply because they feel like that is what is expected of them, perhaps because they fear for themselves if they don't do what the lynch mob wants them to do. So I wasn't hopeful. But that was good news this week. Not for everybody, though. Leftists are absolutely losing their minds over the verdict because they were on the side of the criminal who was harassing passengers and threatening to murder everybody on the train and scaring people half to death, enough so that multiple men, including but not limited to Daniel Penny, opted to restrain him because they felt that he was an actual threat and was about to make good on his promise to kill everybody because he didn't care, as he said, if he went back to prison for the rest of his life. But according to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's not exactly the brightest bulb in the chandelier, the New York City subway system would be so much safer if we just let violent, mentally ill felons with a rap sheet of assaulting people just run amok, threatening and harassing and assaulting passengers, and then locking up anybody who has the gall to intervene. So following Penny's acquittal on Monday, AOC told reporters that locking up people like Penny, not Jordan Neely, right? Not the deranged lunatic who was threatening everybody, but Daniel Penny, who was the man trying to restrain him from killing everybody, including the woman whose face he was getting in at the time. Locking up people like Daniel Penny is what's ultimately going to prevent violence on our subways. Like I said, not exactly the brightest bulb in the chandelier. Here's the brilliant mind of AOC in her own words. See if you can try to riddle your way through this one.
If we do not want violence on our subways, and the point of our justice system is a level of accountability to prevent a person who does not have remorse about taking another person's life. I mean, even people who have engaged in manslaughter or have taken a life accidentally express remorse. And so the fact that a person may express no remorse indicates that there's a risk that it may happen again. And if we do not want to unleash that level of violence, then we should exert a level of accountability to prevent that from happening again.
All right. So that's what's going to solve the New York City violence problem on the subway. And in the streets, we're just, people getting stabbed on the subway, people getting assaulted, little old ladies just getting punched in the face by mentally ill drug addicts who are, so high they don't even know their own name, running around screaming at people and threatening to murder everybody. To remind, by the way, Jordan Neely was not exactly an altar boy. He had been arrested at least 42 times in New York City for a litany of crimes since 2013. That's 10 years, by the way, considering he died in 2023. So 10 years, 42 arrests. I'll let you do the averaging out of that, including drug violations, theft, and multiple assaults. In fact, he had assaulted at least 3 women on the subway, completely unprovoked, between 2019 and 2021 alone. In 2021, he was arrested for punching a 67-year-old woman in the face as she exited a train, literally for no reason. Sent her to the hospital. It was determined that he was mentally ill and drug-addled, so instead of being carted off to prison for beating an elderly woman as she was just getting off her train, he was eventually offered taxpayer housing and treatment as part of a plea deal to get out early, provided that he stayed in the program for 15 months. He walked out of the facility after 13 days and just left. And that was that. 3 months later was the altercation with Daniel Penny after he was violently threatening people on the subway, and he was dead. To clarify here, by the way, while we're telling the truth that the media don't care to, there is a serious doubt as to whether or not Neely's death was actually caused by Daniel Penny putting him in a headlock, during which, by the way, Penny was assisted in his efforts to restrain Neely by multiple other people, including a black man. It was a Latino woman that he was protecting at the time. I know the left likes to turn all of this into a race thing. This is a white versus black thing, but if you actually look at the details of the case, if you look at the people who testified in favor of Penny during the trial, this was not a white versus black thing. There were multiple people of color who were on the train who said that they felt threatened by Jordan Neely, who helped Daniel Penny restrain him. Nobody on the train was thinking anything about race when they were trying to protect themselves and other people from this mentally ill, drug-addled lunatic. And while a medical examiner did rule that Neely's cause of death was compression to the neck, a forensic pathologist testified in court under threat of perjury that the convicted felon here could very well have died from other contributing factors, including complications from his schizophrenia and the fact that he had synthetic marijuana present in his system at the time. So here we have yet another black man, supposedly dying of asphyxiation with all manner of illicit substances in his system, which, oh, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed lately, but can put an awfully big strain on your organs and your heart. There's no proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that Daniel Penny was even responsible for Neely's death. And by the way, New York City is filled with Jordan Neelys. Absolutely filled with them. This is a massive problem in this city and in other cities across the country where Democrat policies have absolutely failed. Absolutely failed. Mentally ill people, largely so thanks to hardcore drug abuse, homeless, dangerous in many cases because of their mental state and because of the fact that they are high as a kite. And New York City's response has been, to stuff vending machines full of crack pipes like that's gonna help. It hasn't, in case you were wondering. Turns out that giving people taxpayer-funded drug paraphernalia does not solve a city's homeless drug addict problem. No violent crackhead criminal was ever like, dang, if I only had, a clean syringe, I would clean my life up and get my act together and stop assaulting people. Shocker that it hasn't worked out like that. I am stunned. But while New York City is handing out free tourniquets and spoons and letting all of the criminal, violent felons out of jail, ordinary people are suffering for it. As of mid-September of this year, murders on the New York City subway system skyrocketed 60% year over year. In March, NBC4 reported a massive increase in the number of police officers who were being sent to monitor the subway system because there had been such an uptick in violent crime. It resulted in 53% more arrests compared to the year before because the city is having to pump the subway full of police officers just to keep people from getting assaulted and murdered as they're on their way home from work. And in places in the city where this has not historically been a problem, we're talking about nice parts of Manhattan here. We're not talking about, downtown in the Bronx. In New York City overall, in October of 2024, there were 30% more reported rapes and nearly 21% more reported murders than in October of last year. This is from Newsweek, none of which, by the way, has been made any better by importing thousands upon thousands of illegal aliens fresh from the border. That brilliant plan has not worked any better than the crack pipe Skittle machine plan. Again, absolutely shocking. This is like chopping off your feet and then wondering why you can't walk. But sure, lock up the Daniel Pennys of the world while letting all of the convicted felons go free for justice. That'll fix it. Brilliant here. Of course, Black Lives Matter is all up in arms over Daniel Penny's acquittal, again, because for them, none of this actually matters. The facts of a case don't matter. The circumstances around the case don't matter. Never have, never will. This is always a white versus black issue for Black Lives Matter. They could give a crap about any of the other facts, any of the other circumstances, any of the other details of a case. Whenever you have a white man and a black man, that is enough for Black Lives Matter. That is all they care about. This is race baiting for profit. That is what this organization is about. This is an organization that has raked in millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars and spent it on, luxury properties, haven't helped one school, haven't helped one community, haven't helped one black child, haven't started one scholarship fund, haven't done diddly squat to actually improve the lives of Black Americans. They have raked in millions of dollars and squandered it on themselves. This is race baiting for profit. And but they're so upset about Daniel Penny's acquittal that now they're openly calling for Black vigilantes and even more violence. So this is Hawk Newsome. That's this guy's name, seriously. Or at least what he goes by. I don't know if that's actually the name that his mother gave him at birth, but who the heck knows at this point. Hawk Newsome, founder of the Black Lives Matter New York City chapter, apparently, had this to say in response to Daniel Penny walking free earlier this week.
Just like everybody else has vigilantes, we need some Black vigilantes.
That's right.
People want to jump up and choke us and kill us for being loud. How about we do the same when they attempt to oppress us?
Right.
Sounds an awful lot like racism to me. Don't you think? I mean, literally nothing about the altercation between Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely suggests that Penny put Neely in a headlock because he was Black. I don't think that skin color amounted to a hill of beans in that moment, nor did the fact that Neely was just being loud. That's not what was happening here. Again, there is a serious twisting of the facts of this case and the actual, details of what was going on at the time in order to suit Black Lives Matter's narrative and what they want people to be angry about. It was the fact that Neely was threatening to kill a whole mess of people, including a woman, and apparently doing so in such a way that made multiple people on the train think that he was very serious and a very credible threat, including, by the way, the Hispanic lady whose face he was getting up in, and the Black man who helped Penny wrestle him to the ground and helped hold him down. Nothing about this situation indicates that this was a black-white thing at all. It was a violent, crazy drug addict thing. That's what this was. This was a dang, this dude's gonna kill somebody thing. But now we've got Black Lives Matter whining and saying that Black people should just start killing non-Black people whenever they feel oppressed. I mean, this is just a straight up call for violence here. But this is par for course for the left because the left loves violence. They love it. They revel in it as long as it's them doing the violence. They will openly celebrate, not just ignore, not just give a pass to, not just kind of brush off, but openly celebrate with joy the violent murder of a middle-aged man, a husband and a father who was gunned down in the street because he was rich and because he left a company that they think is to blame for all of their problems, because that's what they do. They blame everything, everything but themselves for this problems. Everything is the rich people's fault. It's capitalism's fault. It's a company's fault. None of it is ever their fault. None of the individual responsibility is ever on them, right? So they will openly celebrate publicly without a bit of shame or remorse whatsoever the slaughter of a man shot to death in the middle of Manhattan while walking down the street, and now his family will spend the holidays grieving him. His kids won't have him for Christmas, and that's just laughs aplenty for liberals. But when a violent, drug-addled, career criminal dies quite possibly from all of the illicit substances that were floating around in his innards after being put in a headlock by a good Samaritan because he was threatening to murder people on the subway, he's instantly a hero of the left because the left loves violence. Have no problem with it whatsoever, so long as it's their person doing the violence. I mean, it's sick. It's deranged. These people are not right in the head. If you look at the right-wing response to Jordan Neely's death, I don't see a whole lot of people celebrating that this man lost his life. It doesn't give me any joy to watch a man die. It's a terribly, terribly sad situation. This was a man who was failed by the very parents who are now, kicking his coffin, hoping some change falls out. The very father that is now going and doing press conferences about, how his son was murdered by this white man, and he wants some monetary, retribution for that, when I mean, when Jordan Neely was alive, he didn't give two craps enough about him to, bother to raise his son, to have anything to do with him. He abandoned him. But now he wants, some monetary support for the fact that his son is dead. And I don't see anybody on the right rejoicing in that. It doesn't give anyone joy. There's simply the understanding that Daniel Penny did not do anything wrong by restraining this man who was threatening to murder people. Because we have a crime and a violence and a murder problem in our cities and on this subway system. I mean, but the left absolutely loves violence. They will not hesitate to justify killing someone and to revel in it if it's somebody that they think deserves it for, financial or political or racial reasons. This also happened, by the way, in case you missed it this week. Bet you did, because it's been 23 years since 9/11, and half of this country, including the news media, has just up and decided that they don't care about terrorism anymore, except, of course, when they're celebrating it or just flat out joining in. Weapons, ammo, and a slew of anti-Jew and anti-America terrorist paraphernalia was found at the home of two George Mason students during a raid back in November. A disturbing new report from the Washington Free Beacon reveals. So the FBI apparently raided the home of Jenna and Noor Chana. I don't know if I'm saying that right, nor do I much care. These are two sisters and the leaders of the Students for Justice in Palestine group on George Mason's campus. Both women, both GMU students, had already been suspended by the school for 4 years following allegations that they had vandalized and destroyed school property during a protest back in August, because again, that's what the left does. They don't actually, these young people, they don't actually care about going to class. They don't care about learning anything. This is just professional activism for them, right? And they have no problem destroying public property. They have no problem assaulting people, again, because remember, the left absolutely loves violence as long as it's them getting to do the violence. GMU had also banned the Students for Justice in Palestine group. Took them darn long enough, because it turns out that they were destructive and violent. And the school didn't much appreciate that. But as it turns out, the FBI had even greater concerns over than whether these women had simply been, spray painting and trashing some buildings on campus, as bad as that would have been on its own. So they were acting on a Virginia statute or a Virginia state red flag statute when they raided the Chana home, and they found firearms, ammunition, and materials expressing support for anti-United States and anti-Jew terrorism. According to the Washington Free Beacon, who reviewed court documents surrounding this case, this home was also shared by these girls' brother, who apparently owned some of this stuff. They found pro-terror materials, including Hamas and Hezbollah flags, and signs that read "Death to America" and "Death to the Jews," according to court documents. Police seized the weapons under Virginia's red flag law. An Instagram account under the name GMU Intifada, which was reportedly run by these sisters and has since been deleted, also posted a message vowing an inferno that will engulf all systems of oppression that are upholding the genocide of the steadfast and honorable Palestinians. This is a little disturbing. I don't know about you, but I'm concerned. I mean, here you have a home of people who are clearly mentally deranged, clearly in open support of terrorism and terrorist groups. They have terrorist flags in their home. They have signage openly wishing death to the Jews and death to America. They've got firearms and ammunition. Hello? Is anybody listening here? This is incredibly disturbing, concerning stuff. But again, the violence is perfectly fine. Gunning people down is fine. Assaulting people on the subway, destroying property, wishing death on the Jews, celebrating the mass murder of people, celebrating the mass murder of Israelis, celebrating terrorist groups, all of that 100% okay with the left, as long as it's their people doing the maiming and the beating and the shooting and the blowing up. They have no shame or qualms whatsoever openly supporting this. I mean, a couple of openly anti-Semitic terrorism sympathizers who got kicked off of campus, which is a hard thing to do these days, and yet they managed, for destroying school property, just got caught with weapons, ammo, terrorist flags, and signs wishing death to Americans and Jews while posting about an impending inferno, and it didn't even make the headlines in the national news media. Not even a ripple. If this had been a couple of far-right neo-Nazis busted with AR-15s and some KKK signs and a bag full of pillowcases with, signs that read death to blacks, this story would have been at the top of every major newspaper, every major news site. CNN would be holding panels blaming Trump. It would all be a reflection on, every white man that has ever lived. You know the drill. But this was a couple of pro-Palestine terrorism lovers who just hate Americans and the Jews, and so we're just supposed to pay no attention. We're not supposed to feel threatened, nothing to see here, nothing to be concerned about, and that's if we find out about it at all. The left loves violence. They love being the ones who are violent. They love giving a pass to their violence. They believe that their violence is justified, called for, and should be openly celebrated when it is in service to one of their insane causes. I mean, the fact that we literally saw this week a so-called journalist with actual published bylines who gets paid for her opinion, having no fear whatsoever about expressing joy at a man's murder simply because she didn't like his job, shows you just how far down this rabbit hole we have gone. The fact that our college campuses have been overrun for months with these insane radical extremists who are openly demanding the death of this country and the death of Jews, harassing and assaulting Jews, and now we've got some of them apparently keeping a weapons stash and Hezbollah flags and making death threats, and this has become so normal to the point where it doesn't even cause a ripple, much less the shockwave that it should. That is very concerning, because here's the thing. You are the target. You are the target. I mean, when the left has gotten to the point where this is no longer their radicals, this is no longer their fringe, this is no longer a couple of trolls on the internet hiding behind, fake pictures and names. This is mainstream leftists openly celebrating and calling for violence. This is leftists hailing murder in the street of an innocent man just walking on a sidewalk. I mean, this is giving a pass to college students who are openly threatening the lives of Jewish students and people who disagree with them, who are posing a credible threat. This is the left openly saying that we should let violent criminals go, and that we should let violent people just run amok in cities and do whatever they want, because the minute that you try to restrain them, the minute that you have a problem with that, the minute that you try to intervene, you are now the bad guy, and you should be locked up to keep everyone safe. This is the left glorifying in violence against anyone with whom they disagree. If you are perceived as the enemy to whatever social contagion they are supporting at the moment, whatever warped sense of social justice that they have, they are perfectly fine with you being shot to death, with you being blown up, with you being run over. No problem with it. As a matter of fact, they will celebrate it. They will dance on your grave. No problem at all. And they are doing it openly, publicly, in the media, on television, on the internet. No qualms, no shame. This is incredibly disturbing. This is very, very worrying. And I really shudder to think where it goes from here. And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll be back with me next Thursday. In the meantime, head over to Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show so you don't ever miss an episode. You can also subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with Tim Graham. I will see you guys back here next Thursday. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a blessed week ahead.